Why do so many drugs look like dopamine? Dopamine is a neurotransmitter, a chemical created by neurons that assists in sending signals to the brain. There are many different types of neurotransmitters, each type structured differently and made to carry out specific bodily and behavioral functions. Dopamine falls into the category of catecholamines, which are hormones designed to relieve stress. Catecholamines are structurally made up of a catechol group, which consists of a benzene ring and two hydroxyl groups, and an amine, or nitrogen-containing group. The other two catecholamines other than dopamine are epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are the chemical structures of each catecholamine. Notice how the part that differs amongst these three is the amine tail on the right side of the molecule. Dopamine's main job is to control movement of the body. A lack of dopamine, for instance, is typically what leads to Parkinson's disease, a disorder that causes uncontrollable tremors. Despite motor control being the main task for dopamine, it also plays a strong role in the reward system of the brain. This is what prompts us to grab another donut from a box or study hard for another test so that we can ace it again. It is the chemical that allows us to feel that temporary high or feeling of happiness and euphoria, prompting us to do whatever action caused that feeling again. Dopamine is created by the amino acid known as tyrosine. This is the original structure for a number of neurotransmitters in the brain. Tyrosine is converted into another amino acid known as L-DOPA within the cell by adding a second hydroxyl group. Enzymes then assist in turning this amino acid into dopamine. Dopamine receptors are known as G-protein coupled receptors. These types of receptors cause a cascade of signaling when its neurotransmitter binds to it, which is why dopamine is such a versatile neurotransmitter. Molecules from this structure bind to the dopamine molecule, causing the signal of pleasure to release. The reason for this euphoric feeling following the release of dopamine is due to years and years of behavioral development. As stated, dopamine is the chemical released in the brain when something brings about a pleasurable sensation. Over time, this has caused an association in the brain between pleasure and dopamine release. This is why the release of dopamine alone can now cause feelings of euphoria and bliss. Medications that mimic the effects of dopamine are called dopamine agonists. These types of chemicals can bind to dopamine receptors and transmit the same signals, therefore causing the same effects. There are a lot of prescription medications that have been proven to help treat different diseases and disorders. To treat ailments caused by lack of dopamine, such as Parkinson's disease, pamiprexol or Mirapex is a common drug used to combat the tremors and pain that come with this illness. Notice how the pamiprexol is a very similar amine portion attached to it. This is the portion that allows it to be recognized by and bind to dopamine receptors. This is a trait shared amongst the molecules of other dopamine agonists, such as apomorphine, ropinirole, and rotigotine, all used to treat symptoms of Parkinson's. There are even some helpful medications known as dopamine agonists. These drugs can also bind to dopamine the same way agonists can. However, their job is to block receptors from any incoming dopamine, therefore lessening its effects. These type of drugs can be used to treat symptoms of schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, or other various forms of psychosis. Some examples include prochlorperazine and droperidol. While there are many pros to mimicking effects of certain drugs that have on dopamine receptors, there are also a lot of issues that can arise from non-prescription drugs, street drugs, or illegal drugs. Many addictive drugs are dangerous because of their dopamine-like structures. They can bind to receptors just like agonists and cause the same rewarding sensation. Most people continue to abuse these drugs and become addicted in an attempt to feel the same high they did the first time they took it. The reason this is so dangerous is because the more often the drug is taken, eventually the body will develop a higher tolerance. This means that pleasurable feelings will become harder to obtain, requiring more amounts in order to feel that same high. Eventually, the amount will become fatal, as too much of most of these drugs causes irreparable damage to both the brain and body. This is the cause of almost all drug overdoses. Medications that have the ability to mimic dopamine structurally are extremely helpful for a number of things, but it can become extremely dangerous if used the wrong way. Nevertheless, there is no denying how powerful some of these drugs can be and how much they can do.